Hi, I'm Randy Robison. This is Life Today TV. I have Shaunti Feldhahn with me. She is an author and a speaker, and she has a book that every woman, frankly, needs to read. It's called Through a Man's Eyes, Helping Women Understand the Visual Nature of Men, and she had some help with Craig Gross of the XXX Church on this book, if that tells you where this interview is about to go. There you go. Shaunti, good to see you again.
It's good to see you.
You are tackling this subject. And it can be a tough one because the reality is, hey, we see things differently.
Yeah.
And it can get ugly in relationships. Give us kind of the basic.
But it doesn't have to be.
And that's where you're offering hope. Give us kind of what you see as the basic differences between.
So basically, here's what we as women, wives, moms, girlfriends, this is what we don't get. When we see a man who's an attractive man, we just think, yeah, he's an attractive man. That's kind of as far as it goes. It's just a thought process. We have no idea that God wired the male brain so differently that the sights that you guys see in this culture are processed completely differently in your brain.
What do you mean? Because frankly, I can see a pretty woman and think, oh, she's a pretty woman, and then not have another thought.
Well, and that sometimes does happen, right?
Yes,
but
often.
Yeah. But here's this is what they found when they do, it's called functional MRI scans of the male brain and the female brain. When you see one of those attractive images.
Physiological, okay.
There's a physiological difference that happens. And again, when the woman sees the attractive man, it's the thinking centers that light up. It's the cortical centers.
Right.
And you're thinking, he's an attractive man, yeah?
Right.
Well, when a man sees, let's just say that, I don't know, you're in Target, and the woman walks in front of you, she's just come from the gym, she's wearing the sports bra and the really tight, workout pants, and not much. And when the man sees this woman who's sort of overtly drawing attention to a good figure, there's a completely different thing that happens in the brain. There's this center in the back of the brain, it's called the Nucleus Accumbens. And it's the same center that lights up. Everybody's had this experience where you're really hungry, you haven't eaten all day, you walk into a room, you see food across the room.
A craving.
And yes, and you're drawn to consume that food. There's like this instant gut level, biological, no thought response. It's like this gut level thing. That's your nucleus accumbens lighting up, and you're drawn to consume that food. And then your thinking centers kick in. And you think, nobody's eating yet. It's not time to eat yet. And so I have to, okay, I'll wait, or I'm going to go over and stuff my face with chocolate, right? And the thing is, what women don't know is that when a man sees a woman who's overtly drawing attention to a good figure, that same center of the brain is lighting up. There is an involuntary biological gut level desire to consume the image. It's not a desire for the person, really. It's the image. And it stimulates the brain, unfortunately, quite sexually. And then his thinking centers light up, and he goes, no, I can't be thinking about that. Look away. Don't tear that thought down. Don't think about my wife. Think about baseball scores, whatever it is.
Right.
And what women don't realize is we have never had that. It's interesting. We were replacing the roof on our house because we had some storm damage, and the roofing guy walked into our kitchen for us to get some paperwork, and he sees that book lying there. He was asking about it, and I explain, just a little bit of what I'm trying to tell women. He's like, tell them it is a war in my brain. I don't want the war in my brain, but it's there. And I said, how often is it there? And he looked at me like I was nuts. He was like, what do you mean? I'm like, how often is the war? He was like, it's a war.
Yeah,
it's like I'm living in a battlefield. There isn't a time that there isn't a war. And so I'm trying to, as a woman who, I've never had that experience. I've never had that part of my brain light up when I see those images. Most of us as women never have. And I'm trying to help women understand that so that they understand this really crucial distinction between temptation and sin. The temptations that we face in our life are not sin. Jesus was tempted in every way, and yet without sin. And so it's not the biological temptation that is thrust at men every single day that is sin. That's not it. That's confronting him. He can do nothing about it. And most men tell me they wish they could turn that off when they're out in public, right? It's what they choose to do with it.
Yeah.
And this is where so many millions of men make those rigorous choices. It's all day. And so the guys kind of describe it as, it's a bit exhausting. It's more difficult for a teenage boy whose testosterone is really flowing. Yeah. That's what a lot of men tell me. Like the teenage years were awful.
Oh yeah, people say, I wish the commercials that say, do you want to feel young again? I'm going, not in a lot of ways. No.
Well, and this is what a lot of men have told me. Like the teenage years and the early 20-something years are just living in a battlefield.
Now that is a battlefield, I would say.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then as they get older and as they make those disciplined choices and learn that, it gets easier.
It gets automatic almost.
Yep.
I mean, I think it can get that way. It's like,
and I've heard it gets, but unfortunately, during that process of being a young man, from what I understand from the research, because I've been doing this research for years now, and I've heard this over and over, that's also the high risk time. Because that's when a guy can get trapped and he can make the wrong choices, and it feels pretty good. The testosterone is going and he feels like a failure. You know, he did this stupid thing, he's doing bad at school, but he looks at those pictures, he feels like a man. And it can be a temptation to use it like a drug, like a coping mechanism, and then he's trapped and he's feeling ashamed, he knows it's wrong. Who does he talk to? It just stays hidden. And so that's where I want to enlist the other half of the population, us as women, to be able to be empathetic without endorsing poor choices.
Well, the number one reason guys don't talk about it or admit to it is they know that women can be, and often are, quick to condemn, quick to throw the perv label on a guy. Right? Dennis Prager talks about this, and he says, look, a guy's not a perv because he sees a pretty woman and thinks, wow, you know, it doesn't make a guy a perv. You know, so
we actually talk. That's actually one of the chapters, basically.
Is it? Is it?
Yeah, is one of the chapters. One of the chapter titles is actually just because a guy wants to look doesn't make him a jerk.
Right.
And what women don't know, and again, we don't realize this because we have never experienced that biological piece of it. That gut level instinctive reaction. And so unfortunately, we sometimes take the opposite tack of, and this is, I cannot tell you the number of women who have read some of this, heard me share and go, oh my gosh, every time my husband would see the woman dressed in the short shorts walking in front of us and he would look away, she said, I would get on him for like, you know, do you find her attractive? And well, you know, maybe I shouldn't even be here. And I'm like, he's honoring you.
Right.
You know?
No, I know.
And this is when you say thank you.
Right.
You know?
Right. No,
exactly.
that's huge. That is huge because you're exactly right. Because a girl walks in and all the guys go, you know, and start making the comment. And you're the one guy that doesn't. You feel like you can't even tell that story to your wife because she'll be like, oh, and what was she wearing? You know, and it's like, I'm going to get judged for being
the
good.
honorable guy.
Right?
Know.
Right.
And I think it's one of those things that honestly, imagine what would be different if every single Christian wife, now I want to say every wife in general, and every mom, but let's just say in the church especially, if every woman in the body of Christ, every single one, that every man knew she was safe to talk to about this. Imagine the difference. Because it's so much hidden because he feels ashamed. He doesn't know that other men struggle. A lot of men don't really even realize that other guys have the same exact struggle in the same exact way. And so they're feeling ashamed, they're feeling trapped. They may not even have made terrible choices. They just may be feeling ashamed because they have the initial reaction, right? And imagine the difference if he could walk into, you know, come home from work. How was your day, honey? It was a really tough day. You know, my female colleague, she was wearing that mini skirt again, and I didn't get anything done, and, you know, would you pray for me? And for her to not condemn him, but I'm so sorry, you know, and sort of have we're on the same team reaction, you know?
Absolutely. Do you talk about the passage in James where he outlines how you get from temptation to sin?
I don't No, say it.
I don't, well, see, I wasn't prepared for this one.
No,
I don't remember all the steps.
Yeah.
But it illustrates your point that temptation is not sin, but it takes you through the process.
I have to look at
Yeah,
that.
you have to look at that. I actually put it in one of my books, but you know how that is. I wrote about that.
No, I totally get it. Yeah.
But there is the process, and it has to do with it's how it becomes less. First, you see something.
Yeah.
And it pulls at you.
Yeah.
You're lured, like a fish will see the lure, right?
Yeah.
And you make that, you have that instinct like a fish does to grab that lure, but you have the choice to go after it or not.
Interesting.
And when you go after it, then it grabs you. Right? And takes you captive, and then you're led away, and it leads to death.
And that's when it leads to death. And when it's full blown, it leads to death.
So the lure swimming over the fish is not a problem if the fish knows how to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think the idea of taking every thought captive comes into play, because I don't think we're liable for our thoughts. I think we're liable for what we do with them.
Yeah. Well, and that's where women need to understand that piece of it. Because we've never understood, or most of us haven't, the biological reality, we don't realize there's a difference there.
There is.
We think the thought itself is sin because for us, it would be.
Hey, in a Baptist church,
if our thoughts went those directions,
if the Baptist church I grew up in was right, the thought is a sin.
Really? Well,
so a lot of people are taught that. My point is that a lot of people are taught that in church. That if you have a bad thought, you just committed a sin.
Well, and listen, I guess that there's a distinction we can make. You know, I mean, Jesus talked about if you're lusting after the woman, you're committing adultery in your heart. If you hate someone, that you're committing murder. I mean, it's
well, actually, and I would argue that point too. He said, under the law, you're guilty.
Under the law, yeah. But I get the fact that there's some tension there. I get the fact that yes, by thought, some people mean literally like you sit and you think about it for a while, and then it is sin, right? Yes. But the initial reaction, that's that involuntary thing, honestly, that's what so many women don't understand. And how beautiful it would be if we actually understood each other. Right. And let me just say, the reverse is true, because there's many men that do not understand how their wife feels about this. Sure. Because I cannot tell you the number of men that because I do all these interviews and focus groups, these big surveys, and it's more common than not for a man to say, but she knows I love her. She knows that this says nothing about her. And I'm like, no, she doesn't, because it's a minefield for you living in this culture. You're living in a minefield. It's a minefield for her too. Yeah. She goes through the grocery store checkout line just like you do. You see the woman on the cover of Cosmo wearing not much, right? And it stimulates that part of your brain, and you have to choose to look away or whatever you choose to do. She sees the woman on the cover of Cosmo, and she feels terrible about herself. Right. Because she knows she can't measure up to that. So when you're walking behind the girl in the short shorts and you don't look away, and she sees you looking her up and down, even if it's just a quick look, and it's not exactly a reflex, but pretty close, you know. Right. And
but
you're
no resistance
looking,
there to that
but
reflex,
there was no resistance to that. You looked, and let me tell you, for her as a woman, you have just confirmed that she doesn't measure up, and you as a guy need to understand. That's what I tell men. You need to understand that just as much as she needs to understand this war you have in your brain.
Yeah. There was a great line in a movie called Blue Sky with Tommy Lee Jones and
never saw it.
Not Meryl Streep, Jessica Lange, I believe. And the plot, just background, the plot is he's military and she keeps having affairs and he's trying to hang on and restore their marriage and all that kind of stuff. Wow. And she makes the comment after one of these, little trysts, "It meant nothing to me. Come on, it meant nothing to me." And he looks at her and says, "It meant everything to me."
Yeah.
And that's sometimes, I think, the disconnect between, on the guy's end especially, because, they go, "I looked at the website. I mean, it meant nothing to me." And the wife is over there going,
It means everything.
Means everything to me.
Well, and also, it means everything to her. It's incredibly hurtful because again, you've just confirmed that she's not enough for you. I know you don't think of it that
No,
way,
no,
but
guys
she
do
does.
not think of it that way.
But she does, so it's what she thinks and her hurt that matters in this case, right? Because you have just confirmed that no, she doesn't measure up, and she can't compete with that other woman on that internet
or
site.
that picture online is better than me at home.
Right. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
how they think,
And it's incredibly important for a guy, you know, to understand that. It is one of those areas, I think, for women and men. There's so many of these cases that we just have to stop shoving it under the rug. You know, we just have to start being willing to talk about it.
That's my last question for you. What do you see? What does it do to the relationship when the guy goes to the wife, who may not know anything, and says, look, I've got this problem.
Yeah.
Does everything just fall apart? Because that's what most guys think would happen.
Will happen, right,
Yeah. What do you see?
It's one of the reasons we wrote the book, actually, is because, unfortunately, without any understanding, there is a high likelihood that there could be a problem because often a guy doesn't know how to explain it in a way that a woman will get it. Because he will say things like, but it means nothing to me, okay? And he doesn't realize that's not helping, right? And because he doesn't necessarily, the guy doesn't even know that there's this brain wiring thing, and he doesn't know how to explain that, and you know, and so all she's hearing is all that scary stuff, and so unfortunately might react in a way that's maybe not what he's hoping as he's reaching out to try to bring intimacy and help and hope to the marriage. And so one of the reasons why we actually did the research specifically and wrote the book specifically for women was not just for, and not even primarily for women whose husbands actually have a problem. It's for any woman with any husband or any son. I mean, men,
just
right?
It's just
male brains, so that she can grasp the biological reality and grasp, and we walk her through. If you're feeling freaking out, here's what you do. And here's how you can talk in a way that he'll feel safe to open up, because he's probably going to open up a little bit and then
test the waters, right?
Exactly. And so it's really critical. It's one of the things we most, if there's a guy who's watching this and he wants to be able to open up to his wife, honestly, I would suggest that he read the book for himself first, because it'll give him a language to understand, even though it's technically for women, what she doesn't get.
And also might be able to help predict her reaction and know how to handle that reaction.
Yeah, well, and it's not just predicted. It's, I mean, it is. It's exactly what to do about it. And for him to be able to say, look, I may not be able to explain it perfectly, but this does. And I mean, not that I'm saying this is a perfect explanation, but this is what I would want to share with you, because I love you, and I feel like you would want to know something that is a huge part of my life as a male living in this culture that right now we just never talk about.
If a guy's in that position, it's not going to get any better on its own. So
it's just going to stay hidden.
At least you give it a shot, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know that I'd recommend this as a Christmas or birthday gift for your wife, but it would be very helpful, because I got, you know, the things you're talking about. I mean, it's 40, however many years, you know, none of your business. For me to figure out some of these things, and still there's just guys don't get it, and there's problems. And we can have some hope, is what you're saying.
And they don't have to be these big, deep, awful problems. I mean, there are many, first of all, sure, there are many men who do have big, deep, awful problems with this, but that's a small percentage. Most men are just rustling through, right?
Just guys.
Just guys, just trying to live honorable lives, love their wives, love their kids, you know, just, and to be able, honestly, to say, I'm just a guy. God made me with this brain. This is supposed to be a good thing, not a bad one.
Not a bad thing. It's not inherently bad, though.
This is the way God wired me, and to be able to explain to their wife. And part of that wiring, well, not part of, the reason for that wiring is to enjoy you as my wife. And for the wife to get a vision of, that's a good thing. That's not a bad one. You know, and this is why Craig and I, we have a whole thing in there about sex with the lights on. You know, it's like, it's one of those things. Sorry, are we allowed to say that on camera?
You just did. Yeah, upstairs
Sorry.
we can say anything. So
Okay.
a little more casual.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that there are so many things that so many men have emotionally been longing to share with their wives and didn't know how. And so that's why I'm the girl. I talk to the wives and just say, ladies, understand this. You know, it's just there.
Good stuff. There's more to this. So yes, get the book, but also check out Shaunti when she's on 2 programs on Life Today with Craig Gross. So you get the male and female perspective. You can watch that at lifetoday.org right now. And Shaunti, thank you for taking the time to try to understand us and to help relate that to women so that we can understand them and we can all get along better in a right way.
It's my life too. I've got a husband and a 12-year-old son, so I'm living it.
Oh, you're about to live it even more
Yes,
the next few years
know.
when that 12-year-old grows up.
I know.
So I'm glad you
and
should
a teenage daughter, so I got the whole
be,
thing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you have a real good head start. So thanks for putting
so
that
much.
together to help the rest of us.
Thank you.